difficult area because it relies upon international agreement. And we've just seen with that horrific case of the teacher in South London, in central London. No, it was in South London, the teacher, the American guy who was moving around the world, working as a teacher and abusing children in a multitude of countries. And he'd actually been convicted in one country, and we didn't know about it. So this is the difficulty around access to pornography for children, but we're trying, at least.
Okay, are we implementing all the recommendations of that report?
Good question. I think the answer is no, but I don't know why. And there are sometimes justifiable reasons. Again, so it's a diagnosis of what constitutes pornography and not. You will get more than one answer if you ask 100 people. And it's really difficult, this area. And I guess the approach to take is that where does the responsibility lie? You could be very sort of libertarian and say, actually, it's the responsibility of parents, 100%. And there are other people who think it's the responsibility of governments, 100%. I think in this particular area, practically speaking, I think we're going to have to take more individual responsibility to protect our young people and try to instill them with the values that I think you're alluding to. It's not ideal, but I think that's a realistic response to what is something that is incredibly pervasive. I mean, it's everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And I don't think it's a positive thing in society, don't get me wrong, but I'm just trying to be practical about how you would solve it. And it's difficult when you haven't got all countries. A lot of these servers and things are not hosted. They're hosted in random countries around the world, and it's extremely difficult. Sorry, I sound like I've meandered there, but I agree. I just don't know how to deal with it, to be honest.
Could I raise perhaps what may be a controversial matter, but I just don't know where we should be going. Jerry Adams was recently interviewed by the police over a weekend for a crime committed, I think, 32 years ago. 42. And this seems to be, we've got enough people in prison, and people who are wandering around 30 or 40 years after something, if they're behaving themselves at the moment, it seems rather counterproductive to spend time in courts and time putting them in prison. It seemed to me that really something like 20 or 25 years would be a reasonable time when you should say that's a statute of limitation, and if things haven't been raised in 20 or 25 years, then they should be left behind.
Right. I fundamentally disagree with you, sir. That's for you to choose, sir. But if you know, Miss Adams has denied all involvement in any part of that crime. I don't know if you've seen the interviews with the son and daughter of Jean McConville. I'll leave you to draw your own conclusions. If I was the son of Jean McConville, I'd want the people responsible hounded until their dying days and locked up. I was aware.
We are in a Christian building. Christian compassion must be something you think about. Christian party. What about sharing a bit of Christian?
If he had been convicted, sir, was in prison, was terminally ill, and wanted a week to spend with his family at the end, I would show him Christian compassion. But if he was part of this, the abduction, the murder of a mother of 10 children, torture, denying all involvement, the organisation concerned for 35 years, and burying her in an unmarked grave on a beach, I'm sorry, my compassion runs out at that point, to be honest. Where I think we need to reflect is upon what this would do to the peace that has come to Northern Ireland. I wonder whether the way in which the Good Friday agreement was formulated, whether we got that right, whether the sort of Truth and Reconciliation Commission that they had in South Africa should have been the way forward, whether we perhaps should have said, look, anybody who's been involved in activities such as murder in the past cannot be public representatives of political parties and cannot be the leaders. Whether that would have been a more sensitive and realistic way to have progressed. Look, I wasn't in the room, but I do wonder when you sort of walk around, you bump into a former member of the IRA in Parliament, it's like, I wonder about that, and it hasn't had a direct impact upon me, but I wonder how I would feel if I had been adversely impacted by the Troubles in Northern Ireland, about seeing people who I thought or was convinced had been involved in the murder of my loved ones. I'm not sure that we've necessarily handled Northern Ireland appropriately, and that this, until we do, and hopefully we can do it from where we are now, but until we do, I just don't believe I want to live in a society where men and women, because apparently there were 3 or 4 women present, and it was 2 women who pulled her out of the house, took her away. When these men and women are, some of which are still free and wandering around in Northern Ireland, I don't know if I want to live in a society where those people are forgiven, so I really don't.
You had a point on the stance that the major parties have taken with regard to Scotland, as far as you do. I had a similar concern with regard to Europe, which I think conceivably is a more important question than the Scottish question, both of them worry me. We have a lot said that, particularly by Mr Farage, that we get laws imposed upon us by Brussels, and that this is an imposition by foreigners. No party, as far as I know, have ever taken him to task about that, or the issue to task. Because, as I'm sure you're aware, European legislation is a matter of decisions made by the European Parliament, who are directly elected, we're going to elect them again shortly, by the Council of Ministers, which are, UK in our case, directly elected members of Parliament, or other ones, and the Civil Service, the Commission.
Who are not?
Sorry?
Who are not?
No, but I mean, it's a different system, and they have to nominate it, but they only ever nominate things for possible legislation because some country has pushed it, okay? And they cannot legislate by themselves. So 2/3 of the decision is made by directly elected parties, and we do this jointly. The media has been bad on this because, again, they've not covered it. Yesterday lunchtime, the BBC did cover it. They had their Brussels correspondent on, and at the end he said this, precisely what I just said, effectively. But I do feel that the parties should be standing up to this, to worry that people are misinformed.
Okay, I mean, yes, I mean, the European Parliament was directly elected, the election takes place on May the 22nd. Turnout is invariably not that good, which is historic, it's always pretty much been the case. The structure of the European Union is very French. It's because we didn't turn up for the Coal and Steel Board in the 1950s. And so we were in a position of a system that we're not instinctive, we don't, it's not the way we would have done it, that's what I would suggest. We do have a reputation for gold plating everything that comes down from Europe, okay? We, instinctively, I think the Brits play by the rules. Elsewhere in Europe, and those of you who travel around Europe, you don't get the impression that the laws that come down from Brussels are particularly adhered to. And I think this is the frustration, and France being an example of that. And I think this is where the rub is that if everyone was playing by the rules, and every stage was democratically accountable, which it isn't really, it's a bit of a carve-up, and in fact the meeting for the next European Commissioners is the Tuesday after the election results come out on the Sunday evening. Actually, a lot of laws do come down from there. Everywhere I turn, anything where I go, why aren't we doing this? It comes back, we can't, or we have to get permission from the European Union to do it. It often happens. A classic example is differentials that I get across was differentials of pricing of alcohol between pubs and supermarkets. Because most of the public drinking in this country takes place out of supermarkets, okay, not out of pubs. So why not levy huge, sort of raise tax on supermarket alcohol and thereby make going to the pub more attractive, thereby support the local pub, have more social drinking, build more community spirit, etc., etc., etc. I'm told you can't do that because of Europe. And I think this is where the UKIP phenomenon has come out. It is because there is a sense that the sort of common sense British way of doing things is being sort of prevented by our membership of a group that don't always behave by the rules themselves. And that's the problem, sir. But we do gold plate, and a lot of stuff comes through. I have a good friend of mine, a good colleague, very, very bright, and he came into the House as pretty realistic about European Union, not particularly sceptical. 6 months on the European Scrutiny Committee, he wants to leave. And I respect this guy's brain, okay? And so my personal position, you give me an opportunity, is if we don't get a renegotiation, I would vote to leave tomorrow. Okay, because I can't, everything I look at, a special relationship with India. If we want to free trade with India, we can't do it. It has to be Europe negotiating with India. Just what happened, Europe and India's just broken down with no date to start renegotiation. Over 1 billion people, and we can't have free trade with them. Okay, America, we're getting somewhere with America, but it's difficult. Why don't I want this country to have free trade relations with Mexico, with Brazil? We can't. We have to do it via Europe, and then we get into a whole long list of requests from various countries, primarily around agricultural subsidies, which prevent us from having appropriate trade agreements with countries that are growing. And Africa, breadbasket of the world, we can't import, they can't actually produce food at a price that is competitive because we subsidise all the food production to protect French farmers, who don't have big holdings, by the way. They have a series of small holdings, and every one of you subsidises that. And that's the problem. And I personally want to be part of Europe. I'd be part of a European Union, okay? I'd quite like to be part of a sort of free trade common market. I would like that, okay? That's what I would have voted for in 1975. And everybody I talked to, most people who are Eurosceptic voted yes in 1975. It's quite interesting.
But all the trade issues you mentioned date back from before 1975.
Yes, but the problem is, sir, is that it's gone on from being a trading bloc.
I understand.
Okay? If it can go back to just being a trading bloc, it's got my full support. I'm not some rabid little Englander here. I'm standing here as a Conservative Member of Parliament, not a member of UKIP. Okay,
but you wouldn't be able to have your individual trade agreement with India.
Yes, it would.
No, because that was part of long before 75.
No, but all WTO rules membership facilitate.
Covered an awful
facilitate that. If you're telling me that if we leave the European Union, that Germany, whose largest trading partner is Britain, is going to start becoming protectionist, I would disagree with you, sir.
No idea.
Okay, all of these individual countries are going to want to enter into trade deals with us. In fact, the Germans, who I have quite sort of strong fondness for and go on various exchanges with German politicians, desperately want us to stay, which is why David Cameron would very much is likely to get a deal, I think. But if he doesn't, I know which side I am on this, because I've just. I know somebody who's drawing up Gulf strategy for the country, strategy for the whole of the Gulf region, okay? And speaking to them, they said we can't actually have trade relationships with these countries that we would like, which would be in the interest of this country because of the European Union. You know, this is not some, you know, head case. This is somebody who knows their stuff. And so there are real problems at the moment. And that's before we start talking about the health of the Eurozone, the economic health of the Eurozone, the massive pressures of migration from North Africa and from the Middle East for a whole variety of reasons. Check out the numbers of people arriving by boat in Italy. As soon as they've got on land, they're coming north. And they're coming north because we're the ones with the strongest economy in Europe, and we're the ones with a welfare state that is attractive to people. They're actually coming for the work.
I think the gentleman's point was
I think the reality
Farage has got the momentum,
Yes.
and the main political party is completely failing to deal with his assertions. That was his question. That's the bit you haven't answered.
Well, I'm not sure
that was my point, and actually nothing that you have said is surprise to me. I've worked in Brussels, I've worked with the Commission, I've worked with the Parliament, so I have lots of concerns about how Europe works. That's beside the point, okay? My concern is that nobody is standing up to say how Europe works, so that they believe Farage when Farage says it's just imposed on us, and it's not imposed on us. And even, the thing I came back to you on was the thing with regard to trade. The trade issue was all sorted out before we joined Europe. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
The Lomé Agreement stopped us buying effectively from the Commonwealth when we joined.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It all predates it, so you can't come back and say, I wanted it to be just the trade, because then you don't like the trade things. Well, I have no concern about the other things. They bother me.
Okay.
I would love to see a renegotiation. I'd love to see get rid of the common agricultural policy. But we need to make sure that we talk facts, so that the public know the facts, and they're not getting the facts now.
Right. In terms of somebody going out and challenging him on that, yes, maybe it's not being done appropriately. Okay, I accept that. But your assertion that somehow, for someone like, if you have to be under 57 now to have had a say in all this. Okay, I was 4 when there was a referendum to join the European Union. You know, I'm now 43, and I look at it, and I'm a bit of an anorak, sir, and I could look back, and I know everything what you've just said, but fundamentally, we gave up trading with the Commonwealth in order to go in that. Okay? At the time, it was thought that was the right thing to do. It was a totally different dynamic, by the way, because we had the Cold War, East-West tensions, all that. It was a totally different time. Now, I'm not wholly convinced, sir, that economic blocks are the way forward. I'm actually wondering whether a nimble nation-state is actually a better way of doing things. Who's arguing for that? Why do we need the protection of the European Union? What protection from what exactly? We're an outward-looking international trading nation historically. Why do we need the protection of a bloc? You're right, Mr. Farage should be challenged on the details of his arguments. But personally, this issue is not going away, and I find actually that the younger people that I meet are more Eurosceptic than you can imagine. Because they look at it and think, what's this all about? You know, I buy my stuff online, it comes from Mexico, it comes... Their perception of who they trade with and where they trade, it's changed, it's different. And they also want to be able to move. And young people are going to move in the future to work because we have an ageing planet. So countries are going to be looking for young, bright, talented people to support their countries, support their economies. So, you know, children and grandchildren of people in this room, they might end up working in India and China and what have you. What's the European Union mean to them? I think it's... I guess I'll close on it. I just think that the whole issue of Europe, our membership of it, it's there. It's not going away. A populist party has come along. It's being opportunistic in many ways. I'm trying not to be party political here because I don't want to be. I understand why I understand why they're popular. They're more about being anti-politics and anti-establishment than they are about being anti-Europe. person, that's what I think. But I do think, though, that the issues around Europe as an institution, we need to have a debate and a referendum on it, because increasingly a large number of the population feel rather disenfranchised and thinking, well, you know, I never did say I didn't want to join in the first place because I wasn't born. You know, and I just don't think that's tenable anymore.
I guess people don't think they're being listened to either on this issue, do they?
No, and I just don't. I think most people, sir, don't care. If I'm blunt, I think a lot of people are disinterested. They only care when they come across it in their life. So some people care about it because they worry about immigration. Some businessmen worry about it because some directive comes down there to hit and they find out that its genesis was in Brussels or in the European Court of Strasbourg or something. And so then they begin to care about it. Most people, until something happens, impacts upon them, they don't tend to care so much about it. What I think has happened, particularly because of UKIP, is now this whole issue around our membership of this organisation is being brought into front and centre. And I don't think it will go away, because I think people will look at it and think, well, didn't know that happened, didn't understand that that's how it works. Because most people, I think you're right, are ignorant of how it works. And I just think we need to deal with it. Make a decision whether we're in or we're not, and then move on. At the moment, I genuinely think that it's difficult to tell which way the country would vote, if I'm honest. I think people would be fearful of an unknown, so they may vote to stay in because they worry about what's next. If they were doing it purely on, does this club help or not, I think they'd leave. So I think there's two dynamics.